Our good friend Danny Cunningham from Locked On Cavs, or as he calls it, Locked On Lonzo Ball, is back to talk about the Browns quarterback situation and much, much more. We'll talk about all of that coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Danny Cunningham joining the show. You are. I think you were my first guest I had on, Danny. You're also my first repeat guest on the show.
Wow, what an honor. What an honor for me.
You can find Danny over at Locked On Cavs. He does a tremendous job over there. We always plug his show at the end of this show to remind you to listen over there as well. So, but the nice thing about Danny, as I always like to say, is that he's versatile. He is very versatile in that, yes, he talks Cavs, but he also is a part-timer like me over at 92 Through the Fan here in Cleveland. And so he talks all sports, all things Cleveland sports. And so he can certainly talk some football, and we're excited to have him on today to talk about, well, I mean, what else is there to talk about other than Shedeur Sanders at Locked On Browns, Danny?
I thought we were going to talk about the celebrity dads. You have one now in Dion. I now have one with LeVar Ball and
that is a good
Cavs.
That's a good
I thought we were
point.
just going to compare celebrity dads for a half hour today.
Can
the
we
message got lost.
Can we start a show?
Neither of them have 10 toes.
Real basketball dads of Cleveland, like something along those lines. Like, I mean, I guess it's not just basketball. It's
Larry
football
Nance Sr. back in the fold now.
Yeah,
like we've got the celebrity dads in Cleveland.
Man, this is like really, there really could be a show here. I think we're onto something. I don't know how much access Dion will be willing to give because he just wants to do his own stuff, but you know, it's worth a shot. We could pitch it to him, see if he's in.
I think LeVar Ball is good given access.
Absolutely, he would be. He's showing up on First Take, so I'm sure he would absolutely. We should try to get him on the show at some point, or you should try to get him on your show.
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
No, we're excited to talk about the Browns though with Danny. I do want to remind you, as always, to hit that subscribe button. Remember, you can find content with Locked On Browns every week. Most weeks, Monday through Friday. These next 2 weeks, as I've already told you guys, just the 3 shows, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But we'll be back soon enough to 5 days a week as we get you ready for the start of the season. But hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. And be part of the conversation. Jump in the comments section. And, of course, you can hit me up on Twitter at Spencito_. So, Danny, the last time I had you on was before the draft. And we had some fun sort of talking about, like, our best case scenarios with the quarterback room, our worst case scenarios with the quarterback room, what this could all look like when it's all said and done. And now we actually have like tangible quarterbacks in front of us in this room. We know what it all looks like. So I'm curious, I guess, your thoughts first and foremost on how this quarterback room ultimately sorted itself out and where you sort of stand on the 4 guys that are in this room right now leading up to training camp.
You know, I think that there was some combination of this room that I saw back when we first had this conversation. And I believe Joe Flacco had been signed by that point, or was maybe close to being signed. Maybe he hadn't been signed at that point. But like there was always some combination that was possible. Like Joe Flacco being back with the Browns, I didn't think was ever some outlandish possibility. The Browns drafting Shedeur Sanders, nobody thought that was crazy at the time. Nobody thought it would happen in the 5th round.
No.
But nobody thought it was crazy. Dylan Gabriel, definitely the wild card. The fact that the Browns have 2 rookie quarterbacks, I don't think anybody saw coming. And Kenny Pickett, I look at this as, and I understand that he's a reclamation project because he's a former first-round pick, and really he should not have been a first-round draft pick. He has bounced around a little bit. He has had, I think, moderate success would be putting it very nicely for him. But maybe he's a reclamation project. I kind of look at him as the, what is it that you do here type of quarterback. Like I'm not sure that I see his purpose, because I don't think they bring in Joe Flacco to not have Joe Flacco play, right? Like I think if Joe is on the roster, Joe's probably going to start week 1. And then I look at the other 2 rookies and say, okay, well, maybe one of you guys can play. I don't know. Maybe Dylan Gabriel can. And I would think you would know better than me. I would think the Browns like him if they drafted him in the 3rd round. And Shedeur Sanders, I think, has some of the tools. I don't know that I've ever been sold on him as a franchise quarterback. But I look at this and say, this is a really, if you would have given me 10 guesses back when we recorded that podcast on whatever day it was, if you would have given me 10 guesses to say the Browns are going to have 4 quarterbacks on the roster when training camp rolls around, pick them, I would not have gotten this combination of 4 guys.
Nobody would.
And I don't think, I'm just going to be honest with you, I don't think you would have gotten it right either, Spencer.
I can promise you I wouldn't, because here's the thing, and I've admitted this, like leading up to the draft process, I can tell you right now, I was not watching a lot of Dylan Gabriel tape because I just assumed like this guy's not going to be on the Browns. Like, and I part of that too was like I had seen several games of Dylan Gabriel. I watched him twice against Ohio State. I watched the Big Ten championship game against Penn State. Like I had seen enough where I kind of got a sense of like who he was, what he brought to the table. But I wasn't like studying his game like, hey, this guy's going to be on the Browns one day. So I had to kind of play catch up after he was drafted, and it took everybody by surprise that he ended up being the pick there. So you're right. Like I would have never nailed this. Now I think like the big spinoff conversation, especially of late, has been whether or not they will keep all 4 of these guys. And this isn't totally like Andrew Berry technically kept all 4 quarterbacks after roster cut down day last year because he was trying to trade one. But the idea that they keep all 4 going into the regular season, to me, seems a bit far-fetched. I just don't think when you get down to the math of, filling out the roster, you only have 53 spots. And, if you want to keep an extra offensive lineman, which, by the way, is a group that has been massively, plagued by injuries the last couple of years for this team. I just don't know that it's something that makes a lot of sense to ultimately keep all 4. But as you sort of assess the situation, where do you stand on the idea of keeping all 4 of these guys? Is it feasible, you think, for Cleveland?
Well, let me answer your question with a question for you.
Okay.
Does keeping all 4 quarterbacks matter as much when you're not expecting the team to be super competitive? And maybe you're higher on this Browns roster than I am, but I doubt that. I don't view them as like a playoff contending team this year. I think they are a team that is pretty firmly in a rebuild, even if they don't want to say that word out loud. And I think that having 4 quarterbacks, where's that fit? Is that 53rd man going to help this team win games? Probably not, just like with what the other 52 guys look like. So I don't know that it necessarily matters the same right now as it did for the Browns 2 years ago, when the expectations were you go to the playoffs. Like this should be a playoff team. Yeah. This is a playoff roster. I don't look at them in that light right now. So I just wonder if the value of that 53rd roster spot, or whatever you want to call it, matters the same right now as it does when you expect the team to be good.
It's a fair question. And you're right. Like keeping an extra, like keeping a 53rd man in some area on your depth chart, like, does that make or break things for your season? Like, obviously not. No. I do think though, in some respects, keeping all 4 kind of is also like a disservice, especially to the rookie guys, right? Because at some point you want those guys to play. And if it's like, well, hey, we're going to start the season with Kenny Pickett. And then, well, if it doesn't work out for him, now we're going to go to Joe Flacco. And then we're going to go to the rookies. Like to me, it should just be this, you either start one of the veterans and then go right to the rookies, or vice versa. Like pick your veteran, essentially, is the way that I kind of approach it. And I again, I'm not saying it can't happen. It just seems like it would be far-fetched in today's NFL to keep 4. I also do think this like opens up the door for another conversation off of this, which is it totally outlandish to just start one of the rookies week 1? Because in today's NFL, Danny, you know this, like you don't have to sit the guy for a couple years anymore, especially if they're like a first-round pick. Like, for example, Cam Ward is starting day 1, right? Like he's your starter. Caleb Williams had the same thing in Chicago last year. Like there's plenty of examples of this. Now, most of them are going to be first-round picks. But I understand why teams try to still sort of do that at times, but you don't have to. And to your point on like, if they're not going to be that competitive anyway, what's the pressure of putting a guy out there and just kind of letting him learn from live bullets starting week 1, even understanding the schedule is a little bit tougher?
So I would not do that. I do think, and I'm with you with the pick your veteran, like choose your adventure with the veteran quarterback between Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. I'm with you there. I would hesitate unless one of these 2 rookies just blows the doors off the coaching staff in training camp. I don't think it would be wise to, with this team and that schedule in particular, unless one of those guys is just like instantly great and it's like, hey, this is special, I don't think you throw him out there week 1, because I think that, yes, we have seen primarily first round picks able to do that and be successful. And I don't have this answer, and I urge you to look it up because I'm certainly not going to do this work. What is the success rate for non-first round pick quarterbacks that start right away? I'm going to guess it's not very high.
I don't even know how many examples of that we have. Like, that's
probably not many.
Yeah.
But one comes to mind for me, and it's Deshaun Kaiser, and that was a disaster. And I don't know if Deshaun Kaiser would have been good or not. I have no idea what he was going to be in the NFL. But I know that when that happened in Cleveland, his NFL career was instantly ruined. And I don't want that for Dylan Gabriel. I don't want that for Shedeur Sanders. I don't want that for the Browns. I think that if and when, and I do think too, and maybe we can get to some bold quarterback predictions, because I've got a fun take there that I should have told you about before the show, but I didn't think of it. So I'm sorry.
I appreciate the surprise. It's all good.
Exactly. I do think that they should get their opportunity to play this year, but I think doing it from the jump, I'm not sure that is beneficial to anybody involved. The quarterbacks, the rest of the roster, Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, Jimmy Haslam, you, me, don't think it benefits anybody.
Yeah.
Maybe you with the content, but
yeah. I want to hear this bold prediction from Danny Cunningham. I also want to ask him, what is the ideal way that this quarterback situation unfolds for the Browns this year? So we'll keep this conversation going on the other side. It's Danny Cunningham joining the show with me today. Locked on Browns. Keep it locked. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with your friends or family? Maybe it's a game day and you suddenly realize that you don't want to watch the game on your TV. You want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on the tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Last year, I used Game Time for the first time. I bought tickets for my wife and I to go see Ohio State, Michigan. The results obviously were unfortunate, but we did get to say that we saw the eventual national champions in person, and Game Time instantly became my new go-to app for buying tickets after the ticket buying experience. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so continuing the quarterback conversation from the opening segment here, Danny, I want to get a sense before we get to your bold prediction of, and I don't know, maybe this will lead perfectly into your bold prediction. I don't know. What do you think is the best way for this quarterback situation to unfold once you get to week 1 and you sort of start things off?
So I think that Joe Flacco should be the starter week 1. I don't think you bring him in to not have him start games. I do think maybe part of that was, hey, we need to win a PR battle here for the Browns, because God knows they could use some help in the PR department with all of the things that have maybe not been positive PR for them over the last several years. So I think that if he is on the roster, he's starting week 1. I don't think they brought back Joe Flacco to be a backup. I don't think Joe Flacco came here to be a backup. I think that's kind of understood. I personally, if I'm the Browns and I don't know what the market would be, I don't know if there is a market, I would look into trading Kenny Pickett. But again, I don't know if anybody's going to get you that. Going to give you anything.
So it's interesting you bring that up because several weeks back now, colleague of mine here on the NFL channel, Ross Jackson, who hosts the Locked On Saints show, he actually brought up the fact that if the Saints were to make a trade for a veteran, Kenny Pickett would maybe be the guy because of his connection with Kellen Moore. So I think that's an interesting, I think that's an interesting point by you, because I do think there would probably be actually a better market for Kenny Pickett than maybe even Joe Flacco, who people know who he is at this point, and he's 40 years old. But anyway,
continue. I mean, he's in his 40s. What other than Tom Brady, What quarterback ever in NFL history has been worth trading for at age 40 or older?
Yeah, I mean, he's no LeBron James. You know, there's a lot of
No.
trade talks going on with him right now in the NBA. So maybe even the Cavs, maybe.
Yeah, I'll change my name to that the next break. So I think that if they can move Kenny Pickett, that's the direction I would go. And the first 6 games, as I'm sure you have talked about on this podcast several times, probably, the first 6 games are really, really difficult. And I would be surprised if the Browns are better than 2-4 in that stretch. And maybe you play out the string a little bit longer, but I do think that shortly thereafter, maybe by like week 9, week 10, they will get to a point where it's clear that this team is not going to the postseason, that this team is not competitive, that this team is not going to be in a position to where winning games every single week matters. I'm not saying that they should be purposefully trying to lose games, but I don't know that they also need to put Joe Flacco out there for who. At that point, I would like to see both rookies get an opportunity. Maybe it's Dylan Gabriel first. Maybe it is Shedeur Sanders first. I don't think that is something that should be decided right now. I think you see how they look in training camp, what they look like through the first several weeks of practice, and sort of configure your depth chart around that. But I would like for both rookies, if they're both on the roster, and I don't know why they wouldn't be at this point, I would like for both rookies to get an opportunity to play this year. I think ultimately finding out, not even if, because I don't know that there's enough that we'll see from either guy this year to tell us, okay, Dylan Gabriel is our franchise quarterback or Shedeur Sanders is our franchise quarterback. I just don't know that there's going to be enough of a sample size there to feel strongly about that one way or the other. But if you could get through this season and say, there's a chance Shedeur Sanders is the guy. There's a chance. Maybe he's not. We don't know for sure. But there's a chance he's the guy. Or, change that name to Dylan Gabriel, and the same logic applies. But that, I think, would be a really successful thing for them.
You and I are pretty much on the same page with this, where it's like start Flacco, let him ride out especially the beginning portion of the schedule, pave the way for these rookies to start. To go back to our earlier conversation, like I think that is the way I think the Browns will handle it, just based on they might end up opting to start Kenny Pickett instead of Joe Flacco. That might be the biggest difference in terms of like what we both are saying. But I do think they let a veteran play those first like 6 games or so and then pass the baton, assuming the season kind of goes awry, to one of the rookies, and then they go to the other one later. But part of the reason why in our previous conversation, I've started to come more and more around to the idea of, hey, if they were to start the rookies earlier, I'd be okay with it. And it's the point that you bring up there. Like, they owe it to themselves to find out, get as much information as they can on these two quarterbacks to decide, hey, do we think we have something here? Do we need to draft a quarterback in the first round next year with the 2 first-round picks that we have? And so that's kind of the math I do on it, where it's like, I understand they are trying to thread the needle on being competitive while rebuilding. And so I don't think they're going to start either of these rookies early. They're going to try to give them some time to breathe here and get their figure some things out before they play. But yeah, I the more you can get, the better, right? Like, the more information you have, the better. If they each only play like 4 or 5 games, I don't know how much you know about them going into next year. And I think you ultimately then have to draft another quarterback next year.
Yeah, I think that is, if you can get to the point where you can have a better idea of what you need to do next offseason before the draft gets here, if you can have a better idea of how you can approach things this offseason because of what happened this season, to put yourselves in position to not only be competitive next year, but also be competitive after that, while Myles Garrett is still in his prime, I think that is something that would be considered a success this year.
What is your bold take?
So I think the Browns are going to have 4 quarterbacks that start games this year, but not the 4 quarterbacks that are on the roster. I think that 3 of those guys will. I think there will be a quarterback that, despite the fact that they're going to go into training camp with 4 quarterbacks on the roster, it seems like, despite that, I think a quarterback that is not currently on the roster will start a game for the Browns this year.
What's the most obscure name for another quarterback we can come up with? Bailey Zappi? Does he come back?
I mean, been there, done that. No, I think it has to be somebody that you would be adding to the jersey. I don't think if this is somebody that is, we are not doing repeat offenders here. We are talking about a new addition to the quarterback jersey. If this happens, that is the Cleveland Browns way. And of course it will happen in week 18 if it happens.
I am currently pulling up a list of free agent quarterbacks that are still out there that can start a game for. How about hey, this is actually a good one because there was rumors that the Browns were interested in him as a backup plan. Carson Wentz.
Oh, that just hurts.
Can you imagine?
No, I can't because he stinks too. But like that could be the type of guy, like a guy that is hanging on for dear life at the end of his career. I could totally
Desmond
see
Ridder.
that be him. Oh my.
CJ Beathard.
No,
this is a great list.
And bring back Charlie Whitehurst.
Also on this list is Tyler Huntley, but you said no repeat offenders. Also Jeff Driscoll, which he's a repeat offender. He's a repeat offender too. People forget he started that random game in 2023 that meant nothing to the Browns at the end of the season against the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, Nick Mullins not available either.
No Nick Mullins, unfortunately. Yeah, that's a bummer because that's another good name. Are we underrating the Browns at all? Based on some of Danny's earlier comments, I'm going to assume he does not think so. But also, I have some other questions for him in relation to some of the rookies and who he thinks is going to stand out. If there's any players that maybe we're not talking enough about, and a hypothetical situation where Kevin Stefanski's seat is maybe hotter than Andrew Berry's when this is all said and done at the end of 2025. We'll talk about all that and more coming up here in the final segment, Locked On Browns. All right, final segment with Danny Cunningham. We appreciate him giving us some time hanging out this week with us as we get you closer and closer to the start of training camp later this month. And I know, Danny, you made the comment earlier that you're not expecting this team to be very good. But what I think is interesting is like a year ago this time, we were talking about this being one of the best rosters in football, like a dark horse, playoff, maybe deep playoff contender, all these different things. And when you look at the team as a whole, not a lot. Like there are some major changes. Yes. Like the wide receiver room is obviously a clear weakness. There's some rookies that are going to be playing important roles here. But if you feel like the rookie class is going to, show some talents that are cornerstone players on this team moving forward, then even in year one, then maybe you start to see this vision where, hey, maybe we're counting this team out a little bit too early and they could be more competitive than we think. My big argument has been they're going back to the basics of Kevin Stefanski's offense. I think that's huge. I think that's huge for this offensive line that is used to that scheme, runs that scheme, was one of the best offensive lines of football in that scheme. You have a running back that you feel like can thrive in it with Quinshon Judkins now. And then on top of that, like I think the defense maybe gets unfair criticism for last year because a lot of their problems came from the fact that the offense just could not stay on the field whatsoever. And so I think the defense is kind of in line to bounce back as well. And if you put those two things together with at least competent quarterback play, there is an argument to be made that like this team could be more competitive than people are giving them credit for. I'm not going to sit here and predict them to be a playoff team, but along those lines, do you think maybe there's a space where we are underrating this team just a little bit when it comes to this upcoming season?
I think it all comes back to what we've spent the first 20 minutes of the show talking about, and that's the quarterback position. Yeah. If they get, and I have said this more times this week than I can remember, but it's a big if. I've said that about Lonzo Ball's health all week. It's a big if, but if the Browns get competent quarterback play, which I don't have a ton of faith they're going to, but if they do get competent quarterback play, it totally changes the equation of this team because I do think, Spencer, they've got some good pieces defensively. Myles Garrett obviously is somebody who I think is the best defensive player in football. I think Denzel Ward is really, really good. I am excited to see what the rest of that defensive line looks like. I think that they could be, maybe they won't be as good as they were defensively a couple of years ago when they were the best defensive football and Myles Garrett won defensive player of the year. Maybe they're not that. But I think that they could be a playoff caliber defense. And I do like that they're supposed to be getting back to what Kevin Stefanski does best. I am glad that Kevin Stefanski is calling plays again. I think Tommy Rees is a good play designer. I don't necessarily love him as a play caller. And I think it's the right thing that he's not calling plays.
Agreed.
But I just keep coming back to, well, for as high as I am as a coach, or on Kevin Stefanski as a coach, I have my doubts about the guy that he's trying to pull the strings for. Like, that to me is what this all comes back to.
It's very fair. A lot of these conversations in the NFL do come back to obviously the quarterback position on every team. You mentioned Stefanski, and I think this kind of opens the door for this next thing I was going to bring up, because I mentioned, if some of these rookies like really take off year one and you feel good about, hey, maybe we underestimated some of these guys and the roster's in a better place than we thought. There's a weird scenario where we go from thinking like, man, Andrew Berry, this guy's got to go, which I think was a pretty highly debated topic this offseason. His drafts haven't been that great, but if he hits on a bunch of guys this class, if this team, if those guys perform at a high level, but the Browns still lose or only win like 3 or 4 games again, and then it sort of becomes this like, well, hey, how come if these guys are playing well, why didn't they win more games? I think that then like the attention turns more towards Stefanski in terms of like fans maybe being like, hey, Barry finally delivered like you some good players and you delivered 3 wins from it or 4 wins from it. Like, I think that's what the conversation sort of becomes. Ultimately, I feel like the two are tied together no matter what. But could you see a world where we get to the end of the season and we're sitting there like, man, Andrew Berry kind of redeemed himself here, and Kevin Stefanski is maybe the one who's on a hot seat?
I would be pretty surprised by that.
Okay.
I think that Barry is on a hotter seat than Stefanski is. Like, I think that there's a much better chance, and I'm not saying that this is the likely outcome because I don't think it is, but I think there's a better chance that Kevin Stefanski is the head coach with a different GM in place this time next year than Andrew Berry is the GM with a different head coach in place, if that makes sense. I think that they are tied together, but I think if one of them is on a hotter seat, I think it's probably Berry. And maybe his draft picks do pan out. And if they do, I would bet the Browns are probably going to be better than 3-14. And ultimately, like, this team is still only going to go as far as the quarterback takes them.
Yeah.
And I think that Kevin has done a good job in his time here, with the exception of the guy they paid $230 million that can't play football anymore. With the exception of that guy, he's gotten the most out of every quarterback that he could. And for me, I would like to see Kevin have the opportunity to be the head coach of the Browns with a competent quarterback. And I understand that you can't wait forever there, but I think ultimately Andrew Berry has done a very poor job of finding him a quarterback that is worth his time throughout this tenure. And that is why we are in this situation that we're in right now. And two, the other thing, like, if the rookies pan out, that's great. And the Browns are better off for it. But if they don't win, it also probably means that, well, the veterans that they have are probably just not that good.
That is a fair point. I go back to Jimmy Haslam's comments at the owners' meetings back in March, where he's like, yeah, this Deshaun Watson thing, we took a big swing and a miss, and now we got to dig ourselves out of it. That to me does make it sound like they're going to get a chance to solve this thing together. But yeah, I mean, you alluded to it. And I've said this a bunch of times already too. Both of these guys at the end of the day are ultimately going to be judged based off of the eventual franchise quarterback or quote unquote franchise quarterback that they find. Right now, Andrew Berry is linked to the worst trade in NFL history. The only way you make people forget about that, they'll never fully forget about it, but the only way you move past that for people is if you actually identify the guy on the other side of this, that is the answer. And Kevin, he's going to be defined by like, okay, now you have this guy. I'm not saying he could be in the room right now. It might be somebody they take next year. Who knows? But now you have this guy. Do you take them to that level where they become that franchise quarterback? And so, yeah, a lot of this is baked in that quarterback conversation we've been having. But I do think it's interesting that, like, for as much as we've obviously been critical of Andrew Berry and his drafts to this point, he has a chance to sort of start to change that narrative about himself with this class right in front of us that I think actually has a good chance to produce some really good players.
I think it needs to. I think that for Andrew Berry to have the opportunity to try and find that franchise quarterback, I think this class needs a hit. Like,
I had this a couple weeks ago, or like a week or so ago. How many guys do you think you need to see like really shine this year to feel like, okay, this class is a hit, and Andrew Berry, maybe we can start talking about him a little bit differently?
I think
I think
quarterback
Mason Graham has
complicates
to
it.
be one. Mason Graham
Yes,
has to be one because he's a
100%.
number 5 overall pick for sure.
100%. I think Mason Graham has to. I think one of the running backs that they took between Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson has to. And I think because of what Andrew's track record drafting has been, I think Harold Fannin has to. Because Barry, I think you can make the case, has done a pretty good job actually drafting defensive players.
Yeah.
Like I've liked a lot of the defensive draft picks that he's made. It seems as if they can find a corner anytime they need to find a corner, right? Like they've done very well between Greg Newsome, MJ Emerson. They've found NFL caliber players there. But offensively, who is Andrew Barry's best offensive draft pick that he's had in Cleveland?
I mean, could you say like DeJuan Jones right now is the one? Like I'm trying to think.
I mean, before that, I think it was DPJ.
Yeah, that might be the answer because that's
that's a low bar.
6-round pick who turned into like a
serviceable
wide receiver for you. Yeah, that probably is the answer because if you think about like the rest of the offense was built on guys who were already here before him, Nick Chubb, offensive line that was here before you got here, like all that. I mean, those are probably the two best options. And this year you finally have some offensive guys that you drafted. Harold Fannin, like you said, the 2 running backs, now 2 quarterbacks. He still can't hit on wide receivers and he didn't take any this year. So we'll see what that sort of looks like. But yeah, you're right. It's going to take a lot for Andrew to sort of dispel some of those conversations about him. But this class has to. I like the names you throw out there because they're similar ones that I brought up, obviously, when I had this conversation previously. Last thing to get you out of here, rookies or otherwise, is there anybody you think that we're not talking about enough, like from an individual player standpoint, that you think is poised to have a bounce back year, have a big year, contribute to this team in a meaningful way where, maybe it helps them be, surprise some people or have a better season than we think?
I think it's probably not a single player. It's probably the offensive line as a group. Just because I do think that having a new offensive line coach and not expecting the new offensive line coach, because we were not expecting this last year with a different new offensive line coach, expecting a new O-line coach to be Bill Callahan is just not a fair expectation. But I do think that having a new voice in that room and going back to a system that this group, I know not all 5 of them, but that this group has found success with, I think is the recipe for me, Spencer, to see them be successful again, to see them put in positions to do what they can do best again. So I look at them as a group and say, okay, I think the offensive line, even with a lot of the same guys, I think the offensive line can be much better in 2025 than it was 2024.
I have talked about that exact thing a number of times. I agree. I think I understand, like they're older too, and there's injuries that are in play here. Jack Conklin has to prove he can stay healthy and all that. But I just think the simple switch of we're going back to what we do best could be could pay massive dividends to this team in 2025. So we'll see what that looks like. That's a good answer. It's a great conversation. Danny, I'm always grateful to chop it up with you, whether it's on here or on your show. Just real quick, I'll let you have the floor here for a second so you can let everybody know where they can find you.
Locked on Cavs, and you can right now, if you are listening to this wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else, give this show a 5-star review and then just search Locked on Cavs. Find it, click it, subscribe to it, download it. And if you're watching this show on YouTube, which you should be because I have a great camera and I look awesome right now, you should search.
You are stunning.
Thank you. You should type in Locked on Cavs in the search bar, and you should click on all the videos, and you should watch all the videos, and you should give all of my videos a thumbs up, but give this video a thumbs up first.
Appreciate you as always, Danny. That's another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Do everything that Danny just said, and I appreciate you joining us to talk about your favorite football team. Hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day, and for your second listen, you can check out Locked On NFL Scouting or keep it local. Check out Danny over at Locked On Cavs or, of course, Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon. Cleveland, have a good weekend. See ya.